You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast. Guys, what's with sci-fi's love of space whales and space pirates and space ocean stuff in general? Also, is fatherhood as important as superheroery? And how might religious leaders take advantage of an apocalypse? We're going to discuss all of that because this is a What's News, so I get to discuss a bunch of things in lightning fashion. Guys, we are the Priest of the Geeks. This is Systematic Geekology. I am Joshua Knoll. I am here with one wonderful co-host, one wonderful guest host. We have Will Rose and Daniel Sigmund. And you know what? Let's just go ahead and let's jump into it, guys. Lightning round. What's been going on that's new lately? I'll start with a couple things. The Peter Pan and Wendy trailer came out. I was very not caring about that movie at all. I also had no idea it was going to be a live action remake because the name's different. It's not just Peter Pan. Looking at it, I'm interested, especially, from our context. I'm really interested to see how they handle a lot of the racist issues from the original cartoon that we're going to be talking about in an upcoming episode. Also really interested in, there's a lot of really dicey stuff that happened in that cartoon that I'm curious in a modern context what that'll look like. And, I'm sure it'll get attacked by both sides. They made Tinkerbell black, so people are going to be upset on one side. And then there's probably still going to be some kind of hint to that old racist stuff. So the other side will be mad too. And we'll get to talk about it. It'll be great. Daniel, do you want to talk about Mayor of Kingstown?
Yeah. Have you guys seen Mayor of Kingstown?
No, I don't know what it is.
Okay. All right. Okay. It's a Paramount Plus show starring Hawkeye, Jeremy Renner. And he plays the mayor. But the mayor in the show, he's actually a character who works to keep violence down in the city of Kingstown by kind of mediating between the law enforcement and the different gangs. And he says, I'm not for either side. I'm for all sides, and I'm just trying to keep things from going crazy.
So this is what he did between the two Avengers movie.
Yeah, well, and this is on season 2 now, and it's very serious. It's kind of dark, but it highlights some of the issues of power and corruption, in our legal system. And I know it's not superheroey. I heard you earlier. It's actually hard to say.
Superheroery.
Yeah, exactly. But he's kind of a vigilante, only he says significantly more F words and smokes more than Hawkeye and also drinks liquor for breakfast. But it's a very interesting and pretty intense show at times. So I would recommend it.
I think that fits perfect within the realm of kind of what we talk about here. But also it sounds like what his role is kind of what we do as Systematic Geekology on all sides. There's toxic geek fandom, and then there's those who are liquor for breakfast. No, people from all sides trying to mediate and be there for all sides of whether it's gangs or law enforcement or the toxic fandom or whatever. We're right there in the middle trying to say, all right, guys, let's come together and talk about these things in a civil way and geek out together, one big family. And sometimes that's not always easy. So it sounds like it's not all. It sounds like this guy's role and job isn't easy every episode. Daniel, is that what you're saying?
Correct.
A little bit of drama.
I mean, it makes the audience feel exhausted what he has to deal with.
Yeah. Right. If you want to hear about other heroes that smoke a lot and drink or liquor for breakfast and face corrupted government, we have a One Piece episode coming out Tuesday that talks about all of that. It's going to be great. Okay, Will, did you want to highlight maybe what's been going on in Bad Batch?
Yeah, I'm still following. I think it's Star Wars Wednesdays, right? You have Mando and Bad Batch now dropping new episodes on the same time. So my routine of waking up early Wednesday morning, getting a cup of coffee before everybody else gets up and get going on the day, I have to get up a little bit earlier so I can watch both Mando and Bad Batch. But I think there were some complaints earlier in the season that there were too many filler episodes with Bad Batch. They had a couple really deep kind of storyline, plot line. kind of a lot of meat on the bones on a couple of the episodes when it dealt with kind of Palpatine showing up and what's this transition from clones to the Imperial Stormtrooper. Well, now that Mando's dropped, they're really kind of leaning hard. The last couple episodes have been leaning into this kind of transition of basically the Empire going, clones, you suck. We're ready to move on. We've used you enough and it's time to move on. And then like where there's this kind of human rights issue of what do you do with these soldiers who are trained and literally created to be these kind of soldiers, and then what do you do them after? So it leans into kind of like how do we treat our veterans, how do we treat our soldiers, those kinds of things. So I think it is kind of filling in the gap of what happened from the transition from clone troopers to stormtroopers, and it's doing that, and also knowing that it's a wide audience from the younger kids all the way to the older fan base. They got to keep a lot of people happy in a wide age base for that. So, but I'm loving it, and it's pretty good. And I think they've gone deeper now that Mando's and those episodes are dropping, and so getting everyone's attention, going a little deeper in Star Wars lore.
Reminds me of the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was very, very slow. We couldn't figure out why. And then Winter Soldier happened, and all of a sudden the show got exciting.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, with the Bad Batch stuff, it's interesting. They're getting rid of clones on one thing, and you got to have this, you're created for one purpose. What do you do when that purpose is taken away? But on the other end, they're kind of hinting at the Emperor might want to make clones of himself. Maybe somehow Dave Filoni will do what he did with Revenge of the Sith and make that movie make a little bit more sense. Maybe he's trying to do it for Rise of Skywalker and make the Emperor clones not seem so stupid. Sorry, that's just my opinion. Daniel, did you want to highlight really quick the last part of our speed round, that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle trailer just dropped?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It looks like, let's be honest, the last couple of live action movies they did looked weird, and we're not that great. But this, for an animated film that has a unique visual style that does look similar to the Spider-Verse movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, this looks like a lot of fun. I'm a big fan of Seth Rogen, and I was telling Will before we started recording how my older sister is the one who introduced me to Ninja Turtles, and I actually got in trouble as a kid at church because a friend and I were playing Ninja Turtles and we're hitting other kids. So
good job.
Yep.
Oh man, I hear Jackie Chan is going to be Splinter in that. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Oh, wow.
Wild.
That's so cool. Yeah, I didn't even know this was a thing. I didn't even know this was coming out. But then
me neither.
When you shared that with us, Daniel, and then I saw people post it on our Preach to the Geeks kind of Facebook page, I clicked right on it, and the trailer looks really great. And the animation looks really, really good and fresh and different. And the banter between the turtles is great. I am interested, though. Was that April in there who looked a little bit darker skinned? So here we go. It might be another opportunity where some fan base is going to be upset that they kind of race swapped somebody that has, she's got glasses, a little bit curlier hair, a little bit darker skin. It looks like she had a yellow jacket on, so at least that's the same. But like, oh no. So I'm curious how the fan base will be with that. And it makes no difference for me. Cool. Representation's great. But I understand if people get, I have like opinions about Star Wars too, that if they made some changes and tried to do some things with legacy characters that get bent out of shape, that happened to me with Last Jedi, but that's characters, not color of skin. So anyway, move on.
There's a total of one time that the color of skin change kind of bothers me, but I'm holding out to see if I'll be wrong. But the Little Mermaid one, and it's only because they make a point of her pale skin in the source material and the fact that she has a sister that's a woman of color. So I'm kind of like, you had all the pieces to tell that story. Anyway, I'm going to leave that alone because it hasn't come out yet. So I'm open to being wrong.
There you go.
On to the regular part of our episode. We got a few things we want to highlight before we do. Some announcements been coming out. A big one for me. You guys know I'm the Diz nerd around here. The fifth key to the kingdom has been kind of added the last little bit of Disney. They have the 4 keys that they tell their workers have to kind of live by: safety, courtesy, show, and efficiency. Well, they've added inclusion, and part of that is they recently, I think last week, added a handicapped child, a child in a wheelchair, to It's a Small World, which super cool. The way I heard the story was a kid rode the ride a few years ago and got off crying and was talking to his parents. Oh, there's no kid that looks like me.
Oh, wow.
I was really upset because, has kids from all around the world, but no one that looks like him. And he was born paralyzed, all that. So then Disney did this. So I'm hoping we kind of get to see pictures of him going and getting to see a kid that looks like him now. And it's really cool. I'm glad that they did that. It's a big key here too. We're kind of big fans of inclusion. Another huge announcement, not confirmed yet, but it's said that John Berthel, how do you say that? The Punisher. Yeah, it said he's going to be back for Daredevil Born Again next year, even though it hasn't been confirmed yet. After the news articles started spreading everywhere, good old John shares a picture of the Punisher on his Instagram with no caption. So I'm thinking it might be the case. And if so, I'm excited to talk to you guys more about revenge, how that plays a part in our faith and what we think of it when, it happens to play out for the good guy's side. I don't know. We'll see. It'll be fun to talk about when it happens.
Well, and also to see how Disney handles this character who is generally very violent and carries all sorts of weapons on his person. So it'll be I can see how he wouldn't fit the Disney mold very well. So right. We'll see.
Yeah, and with the Daredevil bringing that over, I mean that show was pretty violent too, and they brought him over to be in the spoilers. She-Hulk show to introduce him into the kind of the MCU part of Daredevil and She-Hulk and all that jazz. I'm wondering how the Punisher's going to fit. And interesting enough, in the comic books, they've changed him around a little bit. They're trying to evolve him to be more of like a ninja and use swords, not as much as guns, and to change his symbol a little bit because there's a lot of like truck. Like January 6 bros who are like have the Punisher symbol in the back of their truck and it's been kind of co-opted as kind of like Proud Boy symbol. And so Marvel, others are kind of like, what do we do with this? Do we lean into it? Do we change it? Do we try to fight it? Or do we just kind of change the character, evolve the character? So that's kind of behind the scenes of what's been going on. So I am curious how a Disney Plus MCU show is gonna handle all that.
Yeah, it'll be fun. For the most part, it seems like they're making comics book shows and movies more comic book accurate as opposed to just being edgy for the sake of being edgy. Like they gave Daredevil the yellow costume and all that. So when you get to Daredevil or even Deadpool, if they're going to be comic accurate, it's going to be edgy. So we'll see what they do with it. Yeah. Guys, speaking of getting a little dark and a little edgy, let's get dangerous, as my favorite duck themed superhero would say. Guys, Darkwing Duck has a comic series out right now. And me, having grown up in the 90s in Florida, I love all the 90s Disney stuff. So it's checking all my nostalgia boxes. The first issue was very much just, hey, this feels like the old show. They even included the theme song in the comic somehow. Like, incredible how they did that. Like, I hear all the voices, the song. It's like I'm actually hearing them. Darkwing even does his crazy thing of I am the glue that sticks to your shoe. I am the Lego that you step on in the night. Like all this crazy random phrases he comes up with. And I'm like, this is what I live for this coming back. Right? Nice. It was great. Issue 2 comes along. They kind of did it again, checking all the old nostalgia boxes, but then they introduced something new. So for those of you who grew up watching it or are aware of Darkwing Duck, he is a very narcissistic character, very full of himself. He is the hero. He's what everybody else is looking for, which of course proves not true over and over again, but he's blind to it because he only thinks of himself and sees himself really. So, he's like, the world's greatest hero is here and everybody applauds. And then you see like Superman or something, but he doesn't see Superman. So he thinks they're applauding him. Mm-hmm. It's just him, that's just what his character is. But you see here, just like a lot of times in the cartoon, what'll happen is he'll do something and then the kids end up saving the day and he takes credit for it. The kid keeps trying to get involved and he has his sidekick take her completely out of the picture. And by the end of it, he kind of makes the declaration that his time of superheroery is done and it is now time to focus on fatherhoodery.
And you got to find a way to put that in the title of this episode.
Superheroery.
Yeah. I think we just invented a word, but that's fine. That's good. That's what
I think Darkwing Duck invented the word. He's crazy, man. But his point of he has a far bigger and harder responsibility of fatherhoodery, and the child going, I was fine, I even got to help, I'm so good at this and blah. And he makes the point of like, which, you know, we see this story time and time again where the superhero gives up for his family or whatever. And he's like, well, no, that's the point though. Yes, you did good, but you shouldn't have been in the position at all. So he addresses that. He's hanging up the cape, he says. His sidekick gets kind of sad and bummed and leaves because, well, there's no point of a sidekick if there's no superhero, right? So he walks out and leaves. And it kind of ends there. You kind of know what's going to happen. If some situation will arise where he'll have to be a hero again. But for me, it was really interesting. The comparison not of, you know, trying to protect my parents or my loved one, but it being a father to his daughter. I really liked that being the family thing that we're focusing on. And having a hero that's been a joke so long. Since the 90s, this guy's just been a joke. And he's so full of himself. He's his own world. And seeing that character be the one who's going to put it aside for his daughter, I'm actually really interested to see where it goes here.
Nice. Who's the who's putting out this comic? Is it
it's Dynamite, but let's see. Dybert and Lauro.
Okay. Dynamite. It's a Dynamite book. Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of a superhero trope in a sense that, like, what makes a superhero retire or hang up the cape, hang up the cowl, or Spider-Man, you know, say, I'm done. I need to retire to protect either I'm burnt out or I'm protecting that my loved ones to put this aside and do something else. And then there's also that kind of hero's journey of the resurgence of a call to what makes you get back in the game again. And so I think that applies to kind of our lives too. Burnout, what makes us want to move on, do something different, but then what calls us back into our responsibilities to use our gifts in a way. So that sounds like a great storyline that's been used quite often in comics, but if you can tell it in a cool way with 90s nostalgia. I didn't grow up on Darkwing Duck. That was a little decade ahead of me, but I was 80s cartoon. But Daniel, was that a cartoon that you are familiar with?
Yes.
Did you turn into Darkwing Duck and hit kids in church, or?
No, I had grown out of that stage by the time I got to Darkwing Duck. But no, I loved Darkwing Duck when I was a kid.
Yeah. He was one of those few heroes that, like, I feel like I want to get Daniel's perspective. You didn't really want to be Darkwing Duck. You wanted to laugh at Darkwing Duck. He was funny.
For some reason, maybe it's because he was funny and a superhero that I wanted to be Darkwing Duck. But I think at the time, it didn't cross my mind that he didn't realize he's not a terribly intelligent superhero. So yeah, it's fun.
Well, and it's funny. I've been rewatching some of the cartoon. And you can relate, it sounds like, so this is fun. Will, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I'm learning. This is great. That's why I'm here.
I'm rewatching cartoon and I'm realizing they made the show in the 90s so that you're able to relate to the kids. The kids save the day most of the time, or a lot of the time anyway. Mm-hmm. So it's fun that now we're seeing Darkwing Duck is saving the day, and now his big job is fatherhoodery. And I'm kind of thinking, oh, that's right. When we were kids, the kids saved the day. And now that those 90 kids are adult and reading this comic to their kids, presumably, the dad is becoming the hero. So I found that pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Especially when you're young, you want to be the superhero. And then when you become a dad, it's like, this is actually the most heroic thing I could be doing right now. It's taking care and loving my kids and raising them well. So that's all I was going to say. It's a little sentimental. Sorry.
No, that's fantastic. But it sounds like this character is similar. I mean, is it like the mixture of like superhero and comedy, or a cautionary tale of don't be like this person if you really want to be? I mean, it sounds like Deadpool, if you ask me, or whatever. But like, you know, the comedy aspect to the comedy usually disarms the seriousness of it or makes light of a heavy topic, but then at the end there's kind of a moral to the story, and maybe we'll all learn something here and be better people. But I agree, Dana. Like fatherhood, like the whole world changes in the sense of like your responsibilities, how you see the world, how you envision the world, how you navigate it, and everything changes from that moment forward. So that there is a definitely not. It's not. I mean, you're in your same story, but in terms of a chapter turning the next page to a whole brand new world. That's definitely the case.
And I don't know, there's a few things I look forward to. So often it's, oh, my dad's Superman. So I like being able to have this comic for kids of what if the superhero is like your dad, rather than thinking your dad is like the superhero, so it's kind of like a cool flip on that. And then I'm sure I'm going to have a lot of fun of he's going to be a dad just the same way he was a superhero, which means he's going to be doing things and his kids are going to be really embarrassed and annoyed. And he's going to go, man, I'm the greatest father of all time. All other fathers wish they were me. That's what he's going to do. And
then your kids get older. Your kids get older and they roll their eyes at you and call you cringy. And you're not the best dad in the world. You got to calm your dadness down.
I'm sure he won't know.
Yeah.
He'll still be convinced he's the best. Oh, man. All right. So let's move on to maybe a little bit more mainstream stuff. I think maybe some other people I've heard. There's a show called The Mandalorian. Finally, season 3 has started. It's something we've been waiting for around this show. It doesn't seem right for anyone to start off this conversation other than Will. So Will, Mandalorian.
Oh, man, first episode dropped, and talk about family, talk about fatherhood, mentoring others. That theme continues, and it'll probably move into the other topic we want to talk about too. Is there's a continuity here when it comes to fatherhood, mentorship, responsibilities. But yeah, Mando is back, and I like the first episode. I've been telling people that my kind of hot take or quick take is, that it was a short episode. It felt really recappy, like a lot of things that I already knew was going on. I felt like they had to tell us over again in case there was an audience out there that didn't watch the Book of Boba Fett or didn't watch Daniel's brilliant YouTube recap of season 2. I watched both those things and then went right into episode 1 going like, I feel like I've seen kind of this before. But there are fun moments. I mean, like, the asteroid chase and pirates and meeting the characters. I felt like they just really squeezed a lot in the 30 minutes to lead us to where the next episode 2 or chapter 18, which I'll talk about in a minute after you talk about yours, and try not to spoil too much because I know you guys haven't seen it, but I think there's some continuity there that, man, my slight disappointment of chapter 17 or episode 1 of season 3 was totally redeemed with today's episode of chapter 18, and it's about as peak Star Wars as you get in my humble opinion. So, man, I loved it. But then the big thing here that we're going to dive into this season is really, it has religious overtones. It has faith overtones. That's what's going on in our world today. So seeing Star Wars deal with like fundamentalism versus the other side of the story where they're progressives who feel like the other one is just a cult. And here is Mando stuck in the middle of these two factions of his own tribe, of his own religion, and kind of where does he go? Is his way the only way? There is a baptism, and guys, there's a monster in those baptismal waters. Not just literally, but figuratively. There is a monster in this baptismal water of how Din Djarin was raised in this religion, and I think that's going to play out throughout this entire season, and it plays out more in chapter 18, in the newest episode that dropped today.
Yeah, I don't share some of Will's sentiments. Mostly, there's it's the most obvious thing in the world if you think about it. Chapter 17, possibly my favorite bit of Star Wars since The Last Jedi. I've loved The Last Jedi, but the reason it should be obvious, there were pirates. Mm-hmm. I love pirates. All you need to do is have them appear. You have one that just gives off the most Davy Jones vibe possible, and I'm like, all right. When's Galactic Captain Jack Sparrow showing up? I'm ready for this. This is great. I don't need anything else. Suddenly the show's a pirate show and I'm here for it. Right. You even have the space whales. I love space pirates. One of my favorite video games is Ratchet & Clank Quest for Booty, which, if you didn't know, booties and up your arsenal, all of their names are kind of butt humor. But they're great games. But it was just a short video game of Ratchet fighting some pirates in space. And I'm like, yeah, this is what I want. And that's exactly what we have here. One of my favorite Star Wars characters is Hondo, and I think they're setting the stage where he could make an appearance. And
yeah, I agree with
if I'm lucky, that might happen. So that's I went from, I know we talked about this last week, or the last time we did What's New, where my biggest expectation or my biggest hope for the series was, a little bit more development from Grogu, and then maybe exploring the politics of Mandalore. And now I'm like, I don't think I care about any of that. Just give me more of those pirates.
Well, chapter 18 is going to have no pirates, but all the things you just talked about, that maybe we could get some progression in development with Baby Yoda and growing as a being, and possibly maybe his first words, and like dude.
As long as he gets kidnapped by a pirate, I'm down.
Well, that could still happen. Just not in chapter
kidding.
18.
I don't have to have pirates, but I was happy. I was very happy by their presence.
Nice. Daniel, what's your thoughts on that first drop, first episode?
It was fine. I think it felt a little bit conventional, and didn't. I am excited to see where it goes next, but didn't offer a whole lot new. But I did enjoy the likely or potential return of what is it, IG-11 that Will is not going to say anything about. But that was a fun scene, like almost a Terminator style, going after Grogu.
That was cool.
But I mean,
it was fun.
My first thought when I saw the captain of the ship was this is a weird way to introduce Swamp Thing into the Star Wars universe. That's what I thought. But
yeah, I agree. I told 100. Those memes, it took 2 seconds for those to start flying around. That's why I watch it first thing.
I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah,
me neither.
Man, yeah, they're around. That was no brainer.
Yeah, I think I shared on the Facebook group even like the 4 pictures that were like this episode, and it was like a picture of like, you remember that old like Louisiana gator hunting show? And then it was Steve Irwin's Crocodile Hunter. That's what it was. And then the picture of Pirates of the Caribbean, and I'm like, I mean, yeah, that base, yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Spoilers without spoilers. Those are great memes. But yeah, I agree. Like his, and it does come into play with chapter 18, like his relationship to droids and tech. It is huge, and there's some great moments here. And I will say a droid does show up, not the one you're maybe thinking of, that is in this one, and it has all the feels to it. It's so good. I think it's so well done. I'm gonna rewatch it again tonight before I go to bed. But I think this whole like, man, I just love this idea or what they're doing, and I'm curious because it's in our own religious conversation about construction, deconstruction, reconstruction, fundamentalism. Those are just children's stories. You still believe that crap, or this is our creed, and how else are we going to live if we don't have our creed? Who are we in this universe displaced if we don't hold on to something? Like those tensions and those lines are there, just out in the open, along with fun, battles and dark sabers and the Force and Baby Grogu doing a flip and those kinds of things. So good stuff.
Yeah, for me, I'm excited that baptism is just outright playing a part of the season.
Hey.
Even though it's not Christian baptism, I find it a fun thing to explore from a Christian aspect, because I did a lot of random research of the history of baptism. A lot of your early church thought of baptism as like what we think of the Lord's Prayer as now. Of this is the act of you publicly confessing your sins, and that is salvation happens, which is where you get a lot of these Bible verses and stuff that seems to tie baptism to salvation, which even today you have churches that think you can't be saved unless you've been baptized. And then you have the argument of, can you be sprinkled? Do you have to be dunked? All that. And it's fun seeing those same kind of, to me, which is funny. I don't know why. Even though I grew up Christian, a lot of these debates still just seem silly to me. So it's fun seeing them in Star Wars, and it still seeming silly, but them addressing it seriously. And I'm like, yeah, this is what I want. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, in a sci-fi where you have space monks that that are going around as this religion talking about the Force, you think, yeah, we now have a civilization or a tribe within Star Wars that leans into kind of sacramental baptism, and being a Lutheran pastor, I mean, one of our 2 sacraments is baptism. Baptism is pretty important. I talk about it a lot. And so yeah, seeing that played out, I think it's well done. It's lifting up some themes. Yeah. Are you going to take away, are you going to be able to watch The Mandalorian and get all that you need for Lutheran catechesis? Probably not. We need to have a conversation, but
no, definitely.
But those themes are definitely like doorways into a larger conversation about what we believe about baptism, what we believe about water. Genesis starts with the Spirit hovering over waters. Then Jesus with Nicodemus talks about Spirit and water, and then you have, like, for 2,000 years the church practicing, like, the main initiation into the community of faith is this is a baptism into a community and into the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. So what does that mean? Dying, the old self dying, rising to a new way. This is the way, a new life. Is all part of that conversation. And I love that you have skeptics, you have people that are like, move on, and there's people who are whole hardcore fundamentalists, almost like a cult that where they're having these conversations, because literally, literally, it's like, this is the only way, he says, and you're like, really, is it the only way? Same with baptism. As Lutheran as I am, there are other ways to do baptism. Other churches do it great and have great conversations around the theology about it.
And I don't know. I in all things, I tend to lean against any kind of legalism or it has to be done this way. I'm fully of the belief that random people on islands who've never heard of God and maybe are even not living the best lifestyle, God can still just decide to show mercy to them because he can decide to do that for whomever he wants. So I'm just kind of like, same thing here. I'm like, yeah, you know what, dude, I really don't think it matters if you get underneath the mines and dip yourself in the specific waters that you're supposed to. But also, having done the whole church podcast for so long and done church unity and talked to all these people of different traditions, I'm good at empathizing with other people. So I understand to him the significance. For him, it's important. And so when something is that important to you, whether or not it is real, if that's important to you and what you believe about your faith, you put everything on the line for that, as you should, even if ultimately it's silly.
I keep watching this show and I keep on wanting to be like, just walk away, Din. There are other expressions of Mandalorian culture. Just go join those guys. You
join the pirates.
You don't need to be part of this fundamentalist cult anymore. And like Josh said, I understand, like, when you're in that world for so long, it's extremely difficult to just walk away or even explore other traditions. But I grew up in conservative evangelicalism, and now I'm going to a Methodist church, and I'm hanging out with a Lutheran pastor. And mostly I'm just excited to be able to use a phrase I once heard. They describe themselves as denominationally promiscuous, which I thought was great. So that's where I am now.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Oh, man. Yeah. It brings up that the deconstruction talk that everybody's having in popular, evangelical circles now. So it's like, maybe we'll see Mando doing some deconstruction of his own beliefs.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. For more good What's New episodes.
And don't, not to derail this, but man, I do, we talked about, like, our hopes for, like, Mando season 3, and we want to see, like, Grogu become more of, like, his own person rather than just like this cute baby that's just kind of goo-goos and gagas around and is kind of like so vulnerable. And you can tell in this next episode that he has had some training, he is having some autonomy and growing to himself, that he can be responsible for things. That's kind of fun. But man, I tell you, my big hope for Star Wars is that, like, I hope, like, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, we have a flash forward, like hundreds of years in the future, and you have a little, like, hybrid Grogu wearing, like, a Mandalorian helmet, wielding the Darksaber as a Jedi / Mandalorian. I think the potential's there. They're teasing it, and man, I'm there for it. I hope it happens. I hope it happens.
Well, guys, I hate to rush, but I can't not talk about episode 8 of The Last of Us.
Yeah, can I talk? Can I talk about episode 7 and 8 just briefly? Can I talk about 7 as well?
Guess, yeah.
Okay. 7.
I have so much to say.
I know. This will not be long. Episode 7 is one of my favorite episodes of the whole series. Spoilers, guys, if you're not watching Last of Us and you haven't caught up yet, pause us now. We're going to talk about spoilers. But okay, you paused, or you're back here. But episode 7 really gives us the backstory of how Ellie got her bite. And she, not only because this 80s, like 80s, like throwback to a mall and arcades, of course, I'm going to gravitate to one of my favorite things with that. But this friendship she has, this romance she has, this crush she has, plus, like, this talk of, like, the factions between the Fireflies and Vedra, and then her friend says, like, literally, when after they get bit, like, we could give up or we could just keep going and moving on. And everybody dies at some point, some quicker than others, but let's not give up. Let's move on. And so Man, it was just so freaking powerful and loved it so much. So that was one of my favorite episodes of the entire series. All right, episode. You can talk about episode 7 if you want, but or move on to 8, whatever you think.
I'll move on to 8. Episode 7 in the game. Episode 7 was DLC. So a lot of people didn't actually play that unless they bought the DLC. So when the second game came along is when a lot of people first found out that she was same-sex attracted and all that, and that's when people started to get mad before other stuff happened. I won't say the other stuff, but I thought episode 7 was pretty boring. I didn't care that much about it.
That's why we're all friends and part of one tribe. We can all disagree because, man,
well, that's why I'm Josh with the wrong opinions.
I'll give it a 7. It was fine. It was an interesting backstory. I don't know if I have a whole lot to say about it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't bother me. It was there. Episode 8, though, man, we're back to the main part of the story. You have Joel maybe dying. You got the girl's out there trying to figure out what she can do about it. And she runs into some people that do their best to kind of convince her that they're worth trusting, all this stuff. They end up trying to trade for whatever. I don't want to give the whole story away if you haven't seen it, but it kind of focuses around this guy, David, who was a spiritual father to this whole group of people and tries to convince her that he can be like that to her. And one of our other co-hosts on social media earlier was talking about, David, he lost his father, and he's talking about how a lot of people were counterfeits that tried to take the place, and no one ever will. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's definitely a thing. That's what this guy makes me think of. This David makes me think counterfeit priest, counterfeit dad figure. He's not the real thing, but he tries to pass himself off as. And in our current culture, man, that hit close to home. Stories of people like him. I mean, he was an exaggerated form of a lot of it, but that's
I don't know if it was that exaggerated.
I mean,
pay attention to some of the stories.
Most of the priests that come out terrible aren't cannibals. I guess you can give them that.
Yeah, whenever I see a pastor show up in a show like this, I'm like, uh-oh, here we go. They're not going to be a benevolent dictator that takes care of all people. There's going to be something corrupt. And I was proven right. Like, I was like, oh, maybe he's a good guy. And then he's like slapped that girl. And I was like, oh, crap. I'm like, here we go. Us pastors being portrayed as the villains. I do get a little bit of that, take a little defensive, but then I'm like, yeah, I certainly understand, like, in a post-apocalyptic world, what you gravitate to, what you're going to hold on to that values the most. Like, I was kind of hoping that there would be like kind of an authentic faith there of taking care of a community, but then, man, it turned dark. And it was a great episode. I loved it. The stakes were raised to a whole new level. My wife, who we watched Walking Dead together and stuff, we were watching this one, and she was like, oh, yep, here we go again, cannibalism. But I was like, post-apocalyptic world, that's something you got to think through if your people are starving. Other people have done it, talked about that too, in terms of like, being stranded in the North Pole or plane crash, whatever. What was the name of that movie a long time ago? Get into that. But anyway, I couldn't help but think like, oh, here comes another pastor. He's probably going to be bad and corrupt and evil and want to rape somebody. And then, oh boy, here we go again.
I mean, yeah, but also, I don't know. It was interesting how it escalated, right? Because so much things are maybe not excusable, but we kind of can wrap our minds around a little bit. These people were dead anyway, so we decided to eat them. Yes, that's terrible, but it's kind of like, well, are you going to let people die? You can kind of justify that if you squint, and you think real hard about it, and and that's what it kind of did all along the way. Even when he slapped the one lady, it's like, well, he was doing that because they were saying to kill somebody else, and we don't want to kill anybody else. And this is a time where you need those tough leaders because it's post-apocalypse. And I don't know, we allow those kind of situations to excuse a lot. Even our current political situation in real life, we've excused a lot of people just because they recognize that January 6th was bad. That should be common sense, but instead it's like, oh, well, we can excuse all these other terrible things because they recognized this really obvious thing. And I feel like that's what we do with these apocalyptic stories. It makes you wonder, how much would you be willing to excuse if the situation was bad enough?
I was surprised on a previous episode, maybe it was the first Last of Us episode you guys were talking on, when you asked what's the first thing you would do in a apocalyptic situation. I was surprised. I don't recall anyone saying find other people. Like, the first thing I'd do is like, let's all get together and figure this out.
I'm ending it immediately. I'm done. I give up.
But yeah, I mean, I feel like even in those situations, even if it was like, all right, the whole church is hunkering down at the church, and now these violent people want to come and take everything, all of our stuff. I feel like in that situation, in a situation of defense, quite a bit is justified. I don't know how far I'd take it, because I wouldn't call myself a pacifist, but certainly we can't just let everybody do whatever they want in the name of keeping the peace. Is that it?
Yeah. Survival? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what these post-apocalyptic genre and shows do. It shows you the factions of how they answer the question, how do we survive? What is permissible? What's the moral compass that guides us? And even in episode 7 with Ellie and her friend, they're like, yeah, it's fire. The Fireflies are going to, nope. Fedra is the one that's going to keep the peace. And even their own soldiers, like, they would just go, that one officer was like, they're going to all like kill themselves if we don't step in and help out. But they're all trying to do their best, but they're all wrong in this. And then you have like this church community. You have the safest place and the most utopian was the one with the big wooden walls where he found his brother, and I was like, just stay there. Why are you going anywhere?
Yeah.
But if she's like the cure or has something different about her, you got to get to someone to try to figure out how to do this. But man, that community was about as perfect as you get. There's no way I would leave that place. But like if you have a calling to go do something with this girl who is special, where do you go from there? And I think this show also deals with, as we talked about, dads, mentors, what will you do to help, how you go close to someone. He's keeping his distance because he doesn't want to get too close because he may lose her, but yet she's the one taking care of him. She's not going to give up. And that's why I love 7 so much, that at the end, her friend is what gave her that moral compass of like, don't give up, like keep moving. And she answered that call to help Joel.
That part was pretty powerful.
And they kept going and ran into a cannibalistic, abusive pattern. So awesome.
Yeah. Well, so back to the dad part, just really quickly. And this is something, to me, depending on how you use the word pastor, I also think it's true here. If someone is trying to assert themselves as a father figure or as a pastor, and that's what really stuck out to me, is he's trying to tell her, I'm a pastor, I am a dad, I am this. He's having to tell her this and trying to push that relationship onto her. And wisely, she resisted that, right? And then you end up seeing it escalate till he tries to rape her. Then when she runs out, she runs into, what's funny, I was about to call him Mando. She runs into Joel's arms.
She does.
And he says, what was it? He calls her baby or sweetie or something, which he hasn't done any, like he hasn't called her any like terms like that yet. But it was this moment where he did not ever want to be her dad, never wanted to be her pastor. But in that moment, she ran out. He knew that's what she needed, and he earned that for her. So she accepted him as that. And having seen that was her need, he accepted that role in the moment. And I think that's where you see a true pastor, a true father figure. Will, this is where I want to hear from you.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't make the connection till you brought that up. Like, what did he say in episode 6 about what he really wanted to do? He wanted to just be on a farm and raise sheep. And she was like, oh, really funny, hanging out with a bunch of sheep. But he's a father. But then, what is he shepherding? What is he shepherding in his life to help guide? You have to earn that trust. She immediately didn't want to go with his brother, Joel's brother. He's like, I choose you because I trust you. I have a relationship with you. Of course, she's not going to turn to this like pastor who's like, whatever, because I don't know you. I'm going to go to the person that I've built a relationship. That guy can talk all he wants about, use all kind of lofty words or quote scripture at her, but it's not going to convince her because she didn't have a relationship and she doesn't trust him. And that can go into like us. We can quote scripture all day to someone who thinks is BS, but unless you have a relationship and they trust you, it's not going to make a hill of beans. What are you shepherding? What are you guiding in your life and parenting that earns that trust for others? So that was good. That's a good connection. I didn't even think of that. Yeah.
And that's where you see that it's not what his value isn't in his superheroery, but rather in his fatherhoodery.
Oh my gosh, those words! You could just say fatherhood. You could
fatherhoodery.
You could say being a superhero. They could be fine.
Superheroery.
Why don't you combine superheroery and fatherhoodery together? What comes with that?
I don't know. You have to ask Darkwing Duck.
Super father heroery.
That's it.
Yes. And on that note,
we have one episode left. So there's episode 9 and the last episode. There's one episode in this season. Is done so well. They're in there. I guess there's a second video game that came out, part 2. So they're going to keep going with this. But I'm going to be in Germany when this drops. So I'm going to have to watch on my phone on HBO Max on my phone and watch it that way because I'm not going to miss it on Sunday night. I got to watch it. I've loved every second of it.
I believe that the creators said they have 5 seasons planned out, and I think the idea is
five.
How? Well, I mean, once you get past the source material, you just make stuff up.
Yep.
For me, and we'll see. But I think that's good news that they don't just want to release a bazillion seasons of a show and just keep it going because it's making money. So,
yeah.
Man, stop where the games stop. Isn't that the same trap that they fell with in Game of Thrones? I don't know, man. I don't know.
Moving on. It's worked. It's worked before.
Yeah,
we'll see. I mean, it could go terribly. Yes, you're right.
So now we're at the wrap up because I don't want to go any further into that. And instead of giving recommendations, Dan, I don't think you've been on a What's New before. We recommend one of the things that we talked about today. If you only gave one, if someone hasn't watched or seen or whatever, which one of these do you think you would most like to uplift? For me, it's an easy one, just because I know Darkwing Duck is not for everyone, so I won't lift that up. If you're a 90s kid, maybe. But if I'm doing for just the general population, The Mandalorian is just such a good story on its own. You don't need to know all of Star Wars for it or anything. It's just a good story. So I'm going to have to go with the Mando on this. It's also pirates.
I'm a huge Star Wars fan, but I'm The Last of Us is such a unique show in that it's been so long since I started watching a show, and as soon as it was over, I could not wait until the next week for a new episode. And it's just so well done, and there's not a whole lot of action, and they are somehow able to keep you engaged and interested through a relatively slow-paced TV show. So I'd have to go with The Last of Us.
Fair enough.
Nice.
All right,
I would be a tiebreaker, but I'm going to recommend both Mandalorian Chapter 18 and Last of Us Episode 7.
You have to pick
those
one.
Two. No, I'm not going to pick between two children. I'm a good father and a good pastor, and I'm not.
Will's recommendation is Darkwing Duck.
I'll split the difference and say both Last of Us and Mando. But I will say that Mando Chapter 18, the newest episode that came out today, is some of the best Star Wars I've seen in a long time, and I was all in for it. It's so good. I had so much fun.
It's very exciting.
It's great.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, so for those of you listening, if you want to support the show and get some cool merch on our website, systematicgeekology.org, there's a shop. You can hit there and you can see all kinds of different things. We have ones with different random stuff on it that's different geek stuff. It says like what you like, don't be a jerk. We have one that's like a comic book panel and says all reading counts. It has a list of audiobook comic books right now on the back, so represent the show, get a cool shirt. TJ has some cool phrases on there. There's a lizard breathing fire on a city. It says, sometimes all you want is see a giant lizard attacking stuff. There you go. That's just a funny one, so they're not all churchy. They're not all just shoving our podcast in people's face. Some of them are just fun shirts. So I recommend checking them out. That's my top recommendation. There you go. And guys, of course, we need you all to do one very important thing for us and to remember that we're all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests. This was an Anazao Ministries podcast. If you enjoyed this show and would like to learn more about our network, be sure to check out the Anazao Ministries Podcast Network.